Hello, everybody. Mariner here. I'm back from my hollybobs. And I'm joined today, as always, by Nima, OR895, Arsenal extraordinaire.
And thanks. Nice to have you back, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And also, of course, our resident desert-bound gentleman, Gabe, FPL Lens. How are you doing? How's Phoenix, sir?
It's hot as many other places in the world right now. Actually, now everyone knows the reality in which I live. I thought you were going to say desert rat. That's usually what comes after desert.
I didn't want to be too.
It's early. You're within your rights, I think, to be a little cranky this morning.
I'll save my rudeness for later in the stream. It's okay. Anyway, Nima, I'm going to hand over to you because we've got a special guest today, haven't we?
Yeah, so I'm really pleased to obviously bring in a fellow fantasy football hub writer who I've been speaking to for a few years now, and so lovely to finally meet him on the stream as a guest. So we're bringing in Gian, who is here now in the stream. So just welcome you in, mate. How are you getting on at this deadly hour?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm looking forward to be here. I think it should be a great discussion. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So just to give a quick overview as well to the podcast listeners and to everyone on YouTube today, thanks for tuning in live. There's quite a few of you at this deadly hour. So today's obviously the midfield special. We're going to look at the midfield assets by comparing Mariner's FDR, some stats and value. We have a few questions as well from the Discord, from the YouTube hauler members. We're going to look at kind of different price points of midfielders, and we're just going to go through lots of data. But the good news is we do have John here as well, which is obviously a bit more of an eye test expert like Gabriel. So I think we may get some opposing views, and I know there's some assets that are common in the template that you don't, for example, want to go with in Game Week 1. So yeah, why don't we, before we go into the FPL, something that you might not know, John, is we always start with a FPL philosophy of the week. So okay. This is going to be Gabriel's section with the man sitting on the toilet pondering life. We'll let him do this philosophy.
Yeah, so every week, it's a good way to kind of clear the clutter of the mind as we dive into some numbers, some stats, some eye test. So here's the FPL philosophy for this week. It comes to us from an American author and spiritual leader named Marianne Williamson, and she says, "You must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be." And I thought this was perfect for us FPL managers as we're in the off season and we're reflecting on the mistakes we made last season and how we can change in subtle ways while still being true to ourselves and the style that we like to play. But how can we learn and become new, better versions of ourselves? And I think that the way to do that is it's just letting go of old ways of thinking. Sometimes we have to let go of the old ways that we think in order to adopt new ways of thinking. And I think, and we do that here, I think, on Net That Haul. Mariner, we tweak those metrics all the time. We're always talking about them. They're in development. And so, yeah, that's the way forward, I think.
Really like that.
Yeah, that's good.
As always, I just sit here just shaking my head at this section. I mean, look, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, Gabe. I mean, I do sit on the toilet at 6 o'clock in the morning quite frequently, but I'm not sure I philosophize like the way you do.
The man on the toilet is an empathy bridge for you, Mariner, because I know at 6 o'clock in the morning, you probably want to be sitting on the toilet at this time.
I guess, yeah, it is a good way of looking at things, right? So, like, the new way I want to be is a triple-digit rank. So I got to learn the new way to think before I can be. Real big food for thought. Yeah, I'll take that.
I'm going to think of a new way to avoid Mahrez out my team.
That's going to be definitely for you, because I can see Game Week 1 trap coming for you real quick.
It's already there, mate.
We have a plot graph from a special friend on Twitter that will bring Mahrez into the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Right, should we say hello to a few people? Gabe, do you want to say hello to some people today in the chat, or do we just freestyle through?
I'd be happy to say hello to some people. We got the one that came in early was Kevin Rose. He is a member, of course. He likes to come in early. He drops a question, then he gets back to the show later. So hello to Kevin. We have Joe, who's the Blue Danube guy, who then changed his name to Blue Danube Joe, so we wouldn't forget him. He's also a friend from Twitter. We have David Harrison here, another member. Welcome. We have Stee or Stay. I'm not really sure. I don't know where you're from, so welcome, depending how you pronounce that. Rubber Ducky, Queek. Newsflash, rubber duckies don't quack. They squeak. So squeak to Rubber Ducky. We have, who else? Donny came in, but I don't know if you guys know, Donny's a big runner. This guy's always running. So he's going to wake up early in the morning and run. He did that this morning, so he's going to bed now, but he'll watch it later. William, that's FPL Pepsi, another member, a good friend. Nice to see you in Discord as well, to all of these members. Who else is in here? Mr. Watermelon, good morning from Malaysia. We have FPL Planners, first time in here. FPL Pharmacist, that was a hilarious tweet. Thank you for that tweet, FPL Pharmacist. We have Getty FPL Gaza. Getty FPL Gaza, nice to see you, Gaza. Lucian, FPL Teachers in here. Dominic Egan is in here. We got a good crowd. Podna's in, of course. Hi, nice to see you, Podna. These are all members. Thank you for being a member, everybody. Really appreciate it. Our community is growing. The Discord server is buzzing. Our community is growing. We have an SKLW community tournament team. Gian is one of the superstars in there. So yeah, we're firing.
I think that's why everyone's here, right? I think everyone's here to see Gian. They're not really that interested in Mariner's return. I think he just happens to have come back.
I'm looking at the chat. There's quite a few regulars in here from Twitter. It's good, like Donny, Rubber Ducky. So yeah, I'm really.
Don't let him catch you say that. It's he told us in the Discord. The fun fact was it's pronounced dough, like what you make bread with, and knee, so dough knee. But he's not here live to defend himself. But I'm sure when he watches back, he'll be calling us out if we didn't correct that. Before we go, just a quick shout out to some of the new YouTube members. So Rubber Ducky signed up as a YouTube member. He's a hauler now as well, and in the Discord. Lucian as well, FPL Teacher, as he said. And then FPL Robbie, Robbie and David Harrison are both super haulers. So we're up to 16 members. And we'll put a link to how you can join the Discord if you're a YouTube member in the description of the video as well. So looking forward to kind of interacting more closely with you all in our little community. But we'll go into the kind of the FDR summary for attack in the selected midfield teams now, and we'll just get the show on the road. So do you want to start here, Mariner? It's nice to have you back. I guess it makes sense to have you read out your metric.
Yeah. So this is what we do when so you started doing it last week. Is for the first few minutes, it's always good to just refresh ourselves from the previous content of the of our preseason. So we did the FDR right at the start, didn't we? In the opening show, and one of the things we did was compare the hub fixture difficulty against our own, and it brought some quite interesting information to hand, but there was quite a lot of similarities. So I mean, look, if we talk about the teams who we would, I think, fairly obviously shortlist for attacking assets, we're talking about Manchester City, Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea, Arsenal, top five. And then we've got a bit of a sort of like a bit of a gap, really. And then we've got teams like Brighton, Brentford, Manchester United, who are maybe on a bit of resurgence. And then we've got teams like Leicester, who have a bit of a patchy start, quite frankly. They've got some really tasty fixtures. We've got some really horrible ones too. And then the rest. Down at the bottom, there's always been questions. I think there was a question in last week's show about whipping boys. Forest, Bournemouth, particularly Southampton, probably Everton away, more likely at this moment in time, but things might change. And then even Newcastle, potentially. But that, remember, is based on statistics. That's where we are with respect to the fixture difficulty for attack. Do you want to keep going, Nima, and we'll just dive straight in?
Can I say one quick thing here, Mariner?
Sure.
I think Everton needs to be bottom of every single metric after last night's thrashing. So this wasn't updated last night. So
what happened last night?
What was it?
4-0. 4-0.
4-0.
Yeah.
4-0
with their full strength team.
to a
Who
favorite
to?
MLS team. It's barely football. I live in this country. I know.
Who did they lose to?
Some MLS
Minnesota
team.
something. It's
Oh.
a Minnesota something or other. I don't know.
4-0.
I'm surprised that
4-0.
Newcastle are down there at like 16th with
Right.
Pope and Botman coming in. I thought they'd
No,
be a
I
bit
mean,
higher.
look,
Yes, it is
Newcastle
just
are-
the attack, by the way,
This
as
is
well.
just
So we have the
attack.
defense
Yeah.
one as well. Yeah,
this is
yeah.
attack, but bear in mind that what we're looking at here is that, you know, this takes into account, you know, things like home and away. Okay, you have to look at it over the course of over the course of the season. You have to look at it from the perspective of teams differ at home and away, and of course these are really, you know, we're talking about the matchups as well. So yeah, there's so many different nuances of these metrics. The point is, Gian, is that as you know, as somebody who's an avid eye test merchant, as I call them, there is a lot of caveats in every bit of data.
I think the eye test merchants peddling grass. The eye test merchants peddling grass.
I'm all right with that because I like it. Even I use the eye test occasionally when I'm awake, when there's a game on. But there we go. So anyway,
I guess let's, before we go on, I just wanted to just call out one or two small discrepancies. So for anyone who missed the last episodes, I definitely recommend watching the preseason episodes. Yeah. We'll put a link to those as well. But the thing that stands out to me is that we had Brentford quite high up in the attack for the first 5 game weeks. They were actually 5th in our FDR compared to only 9th in the hub. And on the flip side, we had Wolves up in 9th for attack, and they have them at 17th. So they're, Villa, we've got as 13th. They have them up as 8th. So I know we've averaged them, but for anyone on podcasts who can't see the visual, I think it's just worth bearing in mind that even within the metrics themselves, depending on the inputs, the different models spit out completely different results. But our key thing, John, and I think you'd agree with this as well, is I don't like the official FPL ticker, which is kind of like just a fixture difficulty. And like, it doesn't take into account that a fixture could be good for attack, but bad for your defense and vice versa. Exactly. So like, how can you just combine whether a game is good defensively and attacking wise in one number? It kind of loses a lot of the substance in my view. But we'll keep going into the deeper look across the first 5 weeks, Marina. I've got the next slide up. If you want to maybe call out just a few key things, maybe the aggregate numbers for the top and bottom teams.
Yeah, again, I think, people can refer back to the previous data for more details, just to keep us moving on this, with respect to attack and the specific matchups. So when you're looking at it, obviously green is good, white is neutral, and red is bad for those who are watching it. And the higher the number, the better, the lower the number, the worse. So if we talk about the aggregates for matchups over the first 5 game weeks, well, Liverpool top that with 14.9 for attack, City 13.3. Then, as I said earlier, a gap, Spurs 8.1, Chelsea 7.8. And then another gap to Brentford, Leeds, Arsenal and Brighton, all around the 3 mark. So there's, to me, quite clearly, there are already clear targets, where you are looking, where you would not be objectionable to be doubling up on. And then, as you get further down, slightly lower, Manchester United, they are actually slightly into a negative territory. Might be the fact they've got, Brighton, Brentford, who were very good or at home, or they were last year. Then they've got Liverpool, Southampton, and then a couple of away games, Leicester and Southampton in the first 5. So, I think, for me, I think it's fairly obvious with regard to the teams that are at the top of the fixture difficulty. I've already mentioned the ones at the bottom: Bournemouth, Forest, Newcastle. Away fixtures, Jan, is why Newcastle is a struggle, generally speaking. And Everton as well. Everton are a completely different team away from home than they are at home. Guys, anything you want to just pick out on this, Gabe? Where would you go with all this? Are there any teams that I've mentioned or that I haven't mentioned that you're actually quite interested in attacking wise, or have I covered it?
I mean, I think you've covered it for the most part. I mean, from a macro team perspective, right? It's going to be interesting when we get into the individual players and the teams, and maybe when we look at when we kind of compare the FDR with some zonal matchups to see which midfielders from certain teams we should get. I thought there was an interesting comment from FPL Teacher here, who he notes he cannot believe that Fulham are rated so highly in both models. And this goes back to the previous slide where it just showed the ranking. And they're 14th in your model, Mariner, and they're 16th in the hub model. And obviously Fulham had, and I don't watch the championship, so I can't speak much to any championship team, but we know their numbers and their stats were just outrageous, right? And
yeah.
And if we're thinking, I know in your model, Mariner, you use about 2/3 of the production when moving to the Premier League. So even when you take that 2/3, I think there will be points in time where we'll look at these teams. But right now, Fulham's coming in, as far as the stats go, rated higher than some of the Premier League teams.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, but they are probably coming in as a team who have scored more goals than anyone in recent seasons with respect to a promoted side. I mean, how many goals did Mitrovic score? 40 odd?
40, yeah.
40. So if you take 66% off that, you're still talking about him scoring 15 goals in a season. Remember, Tony went from 30 to 11. As I say, I think 30 to 11, exactly as what I predicted pre-season. But yeah, I mean, all these are numbers taken at a point of time.
Yeah.
Once we start the season, we start again. Everything changes, and I always say this, and it's the obvious easy way to look at it is that by game week 2 we'll know 50% more. By game week 3, 33% more. Game week 4, 20% more. 25% more. Game week 5, 20%. Like that. So let's see how we go. But this is where we are right now. Of course, challenge the numbers. We do not spoon feed on Net That Haul. That's one thing. For sure.
One thing I want to ask. Oh, so I was going to ask you, John, but you go ahead and I'll ask you my question after.
Okay, cool. Is actually the number that's been given to Arsenal of 2.7, and just a discrepancy between them and, for example, Spurs. I think Arsenal's fixtures from a defensive standpoint, especially the first two, aren't great. Palace can provide some serious threat with the likes of Zaha and Elise, Leicester with Maddison, Vardy, Barnes, etc. But from a defensive standpoint, I don't think, for example, Leicester's certainly not a bad fixture. Then you've got Bournemouth and Fulham after. Villa have strengthened, obviously, with Diego Carlos and Kamara coming in. So I think that will be a bit more tricky. But again, Palace, not a brilliant defensive side, a very average one, respectfully. So I think maybe Arsenal at 2.7 should be a bit higher.
Well, that's 2.2. Arsenal against Arsenal away at Palace is minus 2.2, and that's because Palace at home is pretty strong defensively. And remember,
so this would be the attack though again, right?
This is attack. It's Friday night under the lights at Selhurst Park. The place will be rocking. Nima, are you worried about that fixture? I would be.
I don't think so. I think the loss of Gallagher. I think the loss of Gallagher is huge, and they're not going to have that dynamo in midfield. On top of that as well, I think we're having a very solid preseason, all wins so far. We've brought our signings early, which we didn't do last year, and we don't have 5 of our first team 11 in the camp with COVID, while the Premier League refuses to postpone it because it's the opening game of the season. So I do rate Palace. I think away against Vieira's team is tough. I would take a point there if I'm really honest. So I'm not deluding myself that it's going to be some easy game, but I'm nowhere near as concerned as I would have been last year when they had Gallagher is my main point.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think their defense is very good. And I've seen some goalkeeper stuff recently, which obviously I won't go into because we covered that last episode. But Gaeta has been coming up in your power rankings a lot, wasn't he? In the 4.5 keepers. So you can see how much our data loves Palace and their defense. One thing I want to ask is about value. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it likes him for value. And I think if you look at his numbers, value-wise, he does stand out. Whether he stands out in the bigger picture remains to be seen. Fixtures I don't particularly like to start with for Palace anyway. I know we're talking about attack, really. But, from that perspective, I think there are, if we look at it from an Arsenal context, I think it's tough. I think it's quite tough. Whether it's minus 2.2, that's the context, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's the toughest game there in the first 5. So I don't consider the Villa game tough because it's at the Emirates, and I think with the newfound connection between the fans and the team, they're really behind the team when they play at home. So whenever I go now, it's just like even if they're down a goal, they're pushing them on. And what I wanted to ask you about was Leeds. So obviously, like Leeds is a team that not many people have paid attention to, and as Mariner kind of mentioned, they do show up quite highly here in the attack, and even past these first 5 game weeks, they have very good fixtures. Bamford's obviously pretty expensive, so I don't see myself going straight into that at like 8 million or whatever it is. But I know that you've personally watched Aronson as well, so
Yeah.
I'd be keen to, when we get to those kind of budget price players, to compare like how he ranks against the other players of his price point, because I think if you're going to go for a quite template team and you have 2 to 3 punts, maybe based on what you shared with us today, Aronson is someone that I'm actually toying with as that punt position. I believe he's only 500,000 more than Neto.
No, they're the same price.
Yeah, same price. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's just
Both
not
same
talked
price.
about, right, on Twitter.
Yeah,
It's
he
like,
hasn't been talked about.
why is he not? So what are your thoughts just there on, I guess, Leeds' FDR or like Aronson? Maybe just a high level overview, and then we'll go into him a bit more as we continue the show.
Yeah, so from that perspective, I think their fixtures, they're not bad at all. If we look at them here, they've got Wolves, Southampton. Southampton obviously really struggled defensively last season, had a really poor end to the season, haven't recruited a lot. I think Wolves are a bit of an up and down team. You don't really know what you're going to get. Before with Nuno, you kind of knew solid defensively. I don't see that as much now. I think there's sort of bridges in the defence. Chelsea, obviously a difficult game, and then Brighton and Everton, which Brighton, brilliant team against under Potter, and then Everton, we've seen what happened yesterday. So I think there's certainly inroads for Leeds attacks there, particularly Aronson. The way he played with Adeyemi at his previous club was very impressive from what I saw. So yeah, I quite like the look of him, and I'm seriously considering him.
Can I just say something really quickly? Just going back to Arsenal, Chelsea, and because Jem was comparing Arsenal to Spurs. You know, Spurs have a combined or a total FDR here for attack of plus 8.1. Arsenal only plus 2.7, and Chelsea is at 7.8, so quite close to Spurs there. What I will say, like I kind of group these teams together, and next week on the show, we'll do the matchups analysis for these 3 teams. They were within like 1.5 non-penalty XG last season, so their chance creation and their attack is quite similar. This is obviously before all their signings. We'll see how the signings impacted. But really, where Arsenal fell behind was in their post-shot XG, right? So after they take the shot, you know, they had a post-shot XG of 16.77, lower than their non-penalty XG, while Spurs and Chelsea were right around the same. And I think that's what really held Arsenal back. And I don't know if Mariner, if you use expected goals on target or post-shot XG in this FDR, I know I use it for NetxG, and that's what holds Arsenal back in my metric, which hopefully will unveil right before the season starts.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
that's fascinating, honestly, because I think we obviously now have a striker, and it's Arteta's first attacking signing. And he's looking to be gelling in preseason as well. Something about Palace that was mentioned just quickly in the chat, which I think is really relevant, is William does say, and this is spot on, is like many other Premier League teams, they've only brought 11 senior players to their preseason tour. So the other reason I'm quietly confident is they've not got much time to gel together, and I wonder how that will disrupt what's happening. I know Man City players like Stones and others didn't travel. They tried to say it was because of travel permit or travel restrictions. But what they really mean is that everyone who wasn't vaccinated wasn't allowed into half of these countries.
Exactly that.
And I think one of the managers from a big 6 side recently said when he's signing new players this window, he's gonna be quite sure that he doesn't sign unvaccinated players, because he doesn't want it to affect him when he's like doing European ties and when he's doing prep for like hot weather training. So I think that's just something to bear in mind as well. Like, look at the clubs who haven't been able to send core parts of their 11 on tour. But do you want to take this one from a FPL teacher before we go on?
Yeah, I mean, I can comment as far as I can without looking into it deeply, but Villa away from home, attacking wise, not as strong as at home. And Everton at home are much stronger defensively than they are away. Much, much stronger. And this is the thing. We've got to look at it from home and away. It's matchups. We work on matchups, don't we, Gabe? Very much is like teams set up differently, home and away. As I say, Villa, certainly Everton were awful away from home. Awful. But at home, were a completely different beast, weren't they, towards the end of the season? Another one was Southampton. I think Southampton's been queried as well. Southampton away have been pretty abject, actually, defensively in recent. And that's one reason why Spurs stand out so much in game week 1. That is a hell of a matchup, quite frankly. That's an enormous matchup. It scares the living daylights out of me.
This is a good point by FPL Pepsi William in the chat. It says Southampton were incredibly beached the second half of last season. So that the stats may be inflated because they were on the beach.
Only 30%, 60% over the full season.
So is it 30% last 6, 60% all season? Okay.
Yeah, 2/3, 1/3 roughly. Yeah.
So Steve also asked, do these get so these do not get altered when players sign, teams sign and sell players?
You have to look at it in context. All right. So let's say Newcastle defense. So you look at a Newcastle match as one playing Newcastle, it might look quite good. But of course, Newcastle since then have signed Botman. So you have to think, is that really the case? But until we actually start seeing how they perform, remains to be seen. So these numbers will change. They tend to have a little bit of a lag, but they will change.
I think what we should do is we'll skip over a lot of this because it is in the last episode. So I think for anyone who wants to see the blocks, you can look at some fixture swings that are highlighted in black cells in the same graphic we were just talking through. It basically just gives you some ideas about like Wolves, maybe something that you want to jump off around game week 6. And it kind of talks about the spells in which other teams have good fixtures. The key block that I would note is that Liverpool and City are kind of looking like long-term holds from this. So I'm sure when we look at the attackers, there's definitely some questions about who our third player from those teams might be. And I think the midfielders, there's definitely some people fighting for that spot. We won't look at the rotation either because this has been covered. So
yeah, we've covered it before.
So people can look at this in the last episode. So let's go to the midfielders for, I guess, under 5.5 because this is a really key part of the discussion. Do you want to give an overview of, so this is kind of the last 6 all teams sorted by
Yes, I will. I'll be very, very quick on this one because actually there's not a lot of data that supports many players at all for these low prices. Certainly the players that we're talking about in the template. Probably the one player who I think is unfortunately $500,000 priced too high is Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall of Leicester. I think at 4.5 he would be almost a complete no-brainer straight into my team. But he's not. He's 5. And that 5 million point is probably, it has another player. It has Leon Bailey. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. But again, when we talk about these players, there's not a lot. There's chinks of light about data. Nothing much. And I think it comes down to the fact that if you're going to go with one of these players, right, who are you going to go to if it's the wrong one? Who are you then going to go to? And I think that this 4.5 million, I think we don't need to worry about it too much. We've got players like Pereira sat there probably playing quite attacking for Fulham and probably on corners, I think, if I remember right.
He got the assist, in the preseason from a corner as well.
So, you've got players like Pereira sat there. I think he's fairly nailed on, but of course there's no data. Then I think the rest of it, I think, is all pretty meh, really. You can see there that Dewsbury-Hall, I've highlighted him on the screen. He does stand out. Who else have you got up there? Shelvey, Rice. Ilanga's an interesting one. Perhaps his numbers jump out a little bit. If you look at you see the green lines going across the screen where his ranks are slightly higher than most. But I think if we move on, we can start looking at it with respect to the on-field stats. And I think we'll go into a little bit more detail, Nima.
We watch. I think Lens just wants to say that these are all Grass FC players because you're kind of just picking whichever one that's 5 million based on like fun, basically.
Look, if they had the stats, they would be the 8 million players. These players do not have the stats. So like when we're looking at the reason you want Dewsbury-Hall from a tactical perspective is because he floats into that attacking mid space, right? And it's those opportunities. Look, it's a shot in the dark. It's a 5 million player, but if he's getting that, that's kind of what we're looking for. So that's why I say like these cheap punts are, I think, rely more on your eye test than on stats.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what we've also done, just to let you know, and and I can just run across the slide just to give you a bit more context. So regarding the information which we're looking at, we've obviously got minutes per appearance, goals, assists, points per start, bonus points per 90. Then we've got your returns, your non-penalty XG, XGI, etc. I've slightly differently to previous weeks, when I was looking at it, because we're talking about attack, I've actually omitted a number of players. And the players I've omitted are players who we probably just wouldn't even consider. Players like Henderson. Why
Have
would
you
we
omitted Kovacic? Because Robert Ducky's wondering why he's not here.
I don't know. I don't know. Did I? It might be there. It might be off the screen. I can look.
Okay. We can confirm in the Discord to him after. Yeah.
But yeah, for example, players like Henderson are not of interest given the other assets of the team, so I've took them out. You see on this one, I've put a few highlights onto the screen. So you'll see there that I mentioned Dewsbury Hall, ranked 16th for minutes. His production on field isn't too bad either. You've got Elanga there. Now, the situation with Elanga, without the potential resurgence of Marcus Rashford, would Elanga be a lot more interesting? Possibly. But I think you can possibly oppose him on the basis of Rashford's re-emergence. We've got Leon Bailey there. I've highlighted him as well for his, again, on-field performance. Now, of course, his minutes were not there. That could change this year. That could change this season. But there's a chink of light there, Gabe, regarding Leon Bailey. And I think I'd like to bring you eye test guys in on Leon Bailey particularly. But the issue is, and again, I keep coming back to this 0.5, apart from perhaps Willock, who I haven't highlighted, but is another one who is sort of like of interest to me, very much goal threat, not a lot else. I'm a little bit lost with that 0.5 price point, quite frankly. So it's a bit, where do we go if Bailey doesn't work? What's your perspective, Jan?
So I've watched Leon Bailey a little bit, and he had this game against Everton last season where he came on off the bench, had a huge impact, basically won them the game, and they got injured. When he's injury-free, he's a really good player, and he's probably, I'd say, from an attacking point of view, the best player on this list. Dewsbury Hall was a close second. He won Leicester's Player of the Year last season, playing in a number 10 role, so he was really good. I don't think anyone here, maybe apart from Leon Bailey, warrants the extra 0.5 because it can be so useful in the defence. It's the difference between going Van Dijk to Robertson or Tomiyasu to Gabriel, and it can be so useful in the defence. So I personally wouldn't go anywhere near these 5.0 millions, apart from Leon Bailey if you didn't fancy a punt. I don't think he's the right choice because if you look at Villa, they've got 3 spots and there's like 6 players competing. You've got Ings, Coutinho, Watkins, Buendia, Bailey, and I know I'm forgetting one as well. So his expected minutes will certainly be lower. He won't start every game. He's very injury prone. So I think in general, the 5.0s, even Dewsbury Hall, he was playing in a 10 last year, but I think with Maddison becoming fitter again, you can see Maddison having more of an impact between the lines and maybe taking out some of his attacking output. So I think mainly it'd be an avoid for all of them, just because none of them are hugely standout options. If there was, then yeah, we'd consider it. But yeah, I'd probably avoid. And one thing, just before I hand it back, Colm asked in the chat about Everton being Chelsea's kind of bogey team. And one thing I would say is I appreciate that in the past, but I think things are starting to change. This is one of the worst Everton sides we've seen in a while. Before the season, you'd be looking at them to maybe at least top half of the table usually, but the fact that they just got beaten 4-0 pre-season with a full strength side isn't particularly promising last season's performance. And I think this Chelsea side is certainly a different one to even last season, a lot more character. Someone like Raheem Sterling coming in, big signing, and I think he will do really well. Koulibaly coming in, maybe a new centre-back. Thomas Tuchel, obviously in another season, getting more integrated to the club will be more comfortable. And I think that Chelsea can honestly batter Everton, just like I think Arsenal will do a job on Palace game week 1. So I just thought I'd get back to that.
I'd love that. Yeah, I'd love your prediction to come true. Something worth saying. Well,
never mind Arsenal. Move on.
So something worth saying is I think a FPL teacher makes a really good point, which is if you did have a 5 million mid, I doubt you would start them every week. So you'd probably want to be looking for someone who rotates well for a matchup FDR point of view with maybe like a 4.5 defender.
Yeah.
So where you've got someone like a Dunk and you might not want to play them in game week
Lewis
1.
Dunk.
Maybe you play like a Bailey in the first game week and then you can alternate. So I think if you were going to spend that extra $500,000, you need to ask yourself, is your 4.5 mil defender in the 5 mil mid better than just like a 5 mil defender you play every week, where you never played a 4.5 mil mid? So I think that's what you're comparing at this point, from a team structure point of view.
You're absolutely right, Nima. That is actually the rotation that I've looked at if I was going to go KDH. But I think, being honest with you, when you've got Pereira sat there at 4.5, he's virtually a lock, I think, and he'll be. I think that's the obvious one. Like you say, are you then going 5 million for your fourth midfielder? That's when it starts to become a little bit of as your fifth midfielder, I think, okay, that's a conversation. As a fourth, I think it's a little bit more of a concern.
I think for a freemium team, you might, like, if you could find like the Dallas of today, where you play him every week and you never bench him, sure. But, Dallas was a defender. So it's kind of like, again, it's not the same. It doesn't quite count. The only thing to say on the power ranking sorting is that Alanga shoots up the table second to Dewsbury Hall. So compared to the previous slide, he was there as well, but you can see he was quite far down on the original slide. So
I think
that
Alanga
was based on minutes.
It could just maybe be an outside one. I personally don't think Sancho will fit in very well under Ten Hag's system. Personally, I know a lot of people disagree. I think he's the right profile, but I don't. So I think maybe it's kind of similar to last season. Alanga could maybe force his way into the side, and then potentially down the line that becomes an option, not to start with, but something to monitor for the future.
I would say that Rashford doesn't fit into Ten Hag's system very, very well. But I think if Gerrard goes out in a 4-3-3, which we expect him to do, and Bailey nails that right side while healthy, he's the only he will blow this price tag out of the water, I think, if he's starting on that right-hand side, combining with Cash, when all of the attention is on the left, right? You have Watkins on the left, you have Coutinho on the left, you have Jacob Ramsey on the left, you have Dean on the left. So the concentration of the play is on the left, and it really creates the space necessary for a speedy player like Bailey to get in behind defenders on that right-hand side. So if that's really how they do set up, I think Bailey is a phenomenal pick, and he will be injured this season. It's happened every season I've watched him. From the flip back to Leverkusen, the guy gets injured half the season at least. So, but at 5 million,
I guess this might be a non-conversation if he gets injured during preseason, but hopefully he stays fit and he's at least an option for us to ponder. Let's go to the more exciting price point. I think this is really interesting, right? So 5.5 to 8.5 million. I think this is definitely far more exciting. It includes our boy Pedro Neto over 20% ownership. It's got Bruno Guimaraes at 20% ownership. And then I can see you've put Foden here, Mariner, because you despise Mahrez. But there's definitely a debate between the two of them and Grealish.
Do you know the reason why I was going to put Mahrez in, but I didn't have time to find his picture. I think I deleted it in disgust last year. Those who watch, go back to one of the previous episodes of Net That Haul for a Mariner rant on Mahrez. So are we going to netto that haul?
I'm still going to make you make your team name Netto That Haul.
I might do. Yeah, I might seriously do it. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So we've got like the 5.5 to 8.5 price bracket. It's quite a wide bracket, but I think it really brings into the whole thought process that we're in a situation, right? And this is where the overall the main discussion is going to come around. This is that there are a load of really, really tasty 8 million assets sat there this year. Saka, Mount, Maddison, Foden, Diaz, Mahrez, Kulusevski, Bowen, 500,000 more. Not great fixtures either. Doesn't get in much in my thought process immediately. But then we've got, obviously, players a little bit cheaper. You've Guimaraes at Newcastle, of course. Harrison at Leeds. Trossard, who amazingly, looking at the last, if he carries on his form, actually blows everybody out the water with respect to performance statistics on the field, interestingly enough. There are a ton of assets. So we are looking at it as a big block. So I think let's start with Trossard, okay? So he ranks first for production. So production means on-field stats, really. You know, Brighton's fixtures are not too bad as well. They're home Newcastle. They've got their home Leeds, and they're away Fulham in the first 5. They've also got Man U, which, you know, I see people talking about Dalot now. Not for me at this moment in time with respect to Manchester United defence, but, you know, are they going to be different? Did Brighton turn them over at Old Trafford last year? I think they did, didn't they?
I think they relied on getting into Europa and out of Conference League by West Ham losing rather than them beating Palace. Yeah.
So I'm still a little bit. So I'm not even discounting that Manchester United game actually, but Trossard sat there in that 6.5 bracket with a potentially resurgent Rashford, who you mentioned Bailey, Gabe. Rashford is another one who, if he starts to produce at that price, is a game breaker. It's a big if. But
can I just add something about Rashford quickly?
Of course you can, mate. Yes, please do.
So William just in the chat asked about Rashford and Sancho and essentially why I don't think they're going to be good in Ten Hag's system. So with Ten Hag's system, he really likes essentially inverted fullbacks to play almost as narrow-sided 8s. If you take someone like Diego Dalot in pre-season, he's been playing in that type of role, and his chance creation, his shots, his positioning has been very much of an 8 or an inverted fullback. Now with the wingers, because of this, he wants them really wide to hold the width. Someone like Sancho, he's fast over a long distance, but if you watch his acceleration, which in my opinion is a lot more important in football rather than pace over 100 meters, it's not that quick. He's maybe slightly better in the inside areas than he is out wide. Because he's flashy, but I don't think it accounts for much, respectfully. So I think he will really struggle, especially against, like, when he has to play against a team that don't give him much space in central areas and they force them out wide. I think he'll really struggle. And then with Rashford's got the right footballing attributes from a physical standpoint to actually do half decently in the thing. But one thing I have noticed with Rashford is that his movement is poor, and that's nothing to do with football, like physically, it's all mentally. So if Ten Hag can coach him to improve his movement, going in to out better, then he could certainly cause more problems. But my worry is that it's a lot easier to capitalize on defenders' mistakes when you're playing in the half space, just naturally the angles that you receive the ball. Whereas out wide, you have to do so much more, and it's why, like, I appreciate someone like Leroy Sané and Raheem Sterling in that season where City won the league. They did an unbelievable job considering what they had to do. And I'm just not sure if Rashford's capable of that at the moment, especially with his decline. So that's why I'm kind of staying away from those two.
I think it's reasonable discussion because, you know, again, the issue is I think at 6.5, we are unfortunately taking one of those 8 million spots up with a Rashford, almost certainly with respect to your drafts. Because, again, I mentioned off air at the moment, I'm currently sat on Pereira, Neto, Rashford, Diaz, and Salah. I'm not happy about not having that second 8 million player, but the problem because of the flexibility, and I think that's, for me, I'm all about flexibility with early season drafts.
Just buy Nunes instead of Haaland, and you can have 8 million mids.
Overnight, didn't he? He's gone from a laughing stock to everyone's buying him. Everyone's like bloody sheep, aren't they?
But no, I think these were amazing insights, John. So thanks so much. That's really fascinating stuff, actually. I think I agree. I'm more interested in Rashford at 1 million cheaper than Sancho. And I do think it's something that we've not seen the same Rashford for the 18 months after his injury. And I wonder if, like, kind of the change of managers and the lack of any system or coaching for all this time by the PE teacher, Ole, had something to do with that. So perhaps having a full preseason, being fit, maybe better vibes around the dressing room. I love looking at these kind of non-statistical things, like that kind of stuff really means a lot to me. So I think the idea that, I don't know if you saw the game they played against Liverpool, John. I was quite impressed in how short a spell of time, like when they were out of possession, they were like pressing like Liverpool, and that's how Martial got his first goal. And then when they were in possession, they were like building from the back like City. So for me to even see them capable of like going from like zero tactics to that in their first preseason game, I was like, oh shit, I need to be careful here. You know, maybe Man United might surprise us, and maybe Rashford is criminally underpriced if he gets his head on and makes better decisions in that final third.
So I didn't actually catch the game, and just to clarify, I would say that Rashford still has potential as an asset, so I wouldn't completely write him off. I think he has the footballing attributes. It's more just his movement, and if you fix that, then definitely Sancho. I'd be shocked if I ever see him over 10% ownership. One thing you did touch about is Martial. Now, I'm a really big Martial fan. I think if he can click, by maybe come game week 5, he could be an absolute lock in so many sides. At 7 million for a player of his quality, he could be an unbelievable asset. So that's one to monitor.
Yeah, 500,000 more than Rashford, so worth considering. Absolutely. Obviously, there'll be a lot to be said about what happens with Ronaldo there as well, though, won't there? That's a discussion for next week. I wanted to bring just a couple of other little players in here as well, guys. Gabe, Kulusevski.
You had to pick him for the Tottenham players, didn't you?
Absolutely, I'm coming to you for the Tottenham players. You know me and Matt, and I like to thrive on misfortune, as you all know. And Gabe has, just for the new listeners and viewers of Net That Haul, Gabe unfortunately has an extreme bias against all Spurs, or has had in the past an extreme bias. Now, he's probably been sat on his toilet thinking about this an awful lot. And the last I saw, you had Kulusevski in your drafts, young man.
It's true. So I did some research on Richarlison, and I'll see if I can put it out there on Twitter. But what I noticed is that I think that Conte bought Richarlison to make Spurs a little bit more like Liverpool. And I think that will be his role. Richarlison has some interesting attributes. He can play across any position on the front three, although he has been more effective. The narrative is that he's been more effective in central areas and on the left, but that's just when he's played with better teams. You know, when he played mostly on the right when he was with Watford. But no player has scored more game-changing goals than Richarlison in the past 5 years. Which I thought was a really interesting stat, and I think he will be like that super sub that's going to come on and press the team. He has excellent positional awareness, so he's going to provide pressure really well. And I don't think he'll be a risk more so to Kulusevski than the other two, but I think Kulusevski certainly nailed the first game because Richarlison is suspended, and that's against Southampton. We saw the Southampton stats there. So I think Kulusevski could continue to provide those lucky assists he provides from the right-hand side.
That's interesting.
Yeah, lucky assist. Look, as a non-owner at the end of last season, right?
Right.
One thing I'd say about Kulusevski is Nima made a really good point earlier about non-footballing factors, and Daniel Levy has always been quite a money-conscious operator, right? So I think if he's spending 50 million and Conte's asked for Richarlison specifically, I can imagine Kulusevski's minutes being very managed and not seeing a lot of 90 minutes. And I think that would kind of disqualify him as an option, considering, as you can see on the screen, so many good options.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painful, right? Because with Richarlison banned, it's actually a bad thing because it means you'll have no info after the first game week, whereas you will for every other asset in every other team. So it's like you have to wait another game week, but then maybe game week 2 on its own isn't enough data. So then like you're kind of lingering, holding on to Kulusevski for multiple weeks just to see what's going to happen with his minutes because you don't get the confirmation outright. But maybe the upside in getting that haul against Southampton is worth it, knowing that Richarlison isn't there to sub on and you can kind of fix the fire later when you know what other 8 million assets have emerged as the best ones. But I think that's a really interesting point.
I lingered last season without Spurs assets, and I paid.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to cover. I put a little question into the chat group a couple of minutes ago about City, because obviously there's so many City assets there: Foden, Mahrez, Bernardo Silva, even Gundogan. You know, are we keeping a slot for a City. Yeah, I've seen it. Are we this is my inherent bias about to appear. Are we keeping a slot for a City mid, or are we going to avoid them to start with, bearing in mind that if we're on Haaland, as I don't know how many I am at this moment. Nima, you on Haaland?
I was.
You was. Okay. Gabe, you are.
I still could be. I'm waiting for pre-season. There was an article in The Athletic that kind of put me off him, which was it basically said that it said that Man City sold themselves to Haaland during negotiations by assuring him they would not push him to play if he needed a rest or had an injury. The 22-year-old had considered the less physical Spanish football might better suit him to prolong his career, but City officials argued that he would be more likely to play even when not ready if he were to join Real Madrid, such as the pressure on new signings at the Bernabeu. As City, they reasoned he would not be rushed quite so much, and that might be in evidence already from the preseason.
Wait, one of these teams has a 9 already, and the other one doesn't have a 9. And the one that doesn't have a 9 is arguing that the team with the 9 is not going to be able to rest them, and the team without the 9 is going to be able to rest them.
So they're saying it. So they're saying it based on the fact that they don't need a 9 to dominate the Premier League.
Yeah, exactly.
They've won it for years without, and so be it. If he wants a rest, and imagine at 22 having to be so worried about prolonging your career already that is a factor. That's the thing that scared me. And people always talked about his injury history. I said I don't care. Like Pep's going to use him all the time because he wants to get him ready for the Champions League. They've not had a focal attacker all these years. They need time to bed him in before the Champions League kicks in. So I was convinced he would start every game. But if he's not even played in the Community Shield, I can see a lot of that ownership dropping and moving to Kane very quickly. So that's something I'm being a bit more flexible about now. Just kind of reading that and knowing that he's worried about prolonging his career and he has an injury history. And so I'm very quickly getting cold on that, I would just say, Chris, which means that
I think Haaland might actually be being avoided. If we go back to the question about City mids, there's so many. I think Grealish is probably the dark horse that I could see really coming into his own. One, he's at 7 million, so he's less expensive than the other two in Mahrez and Foden. Foden obviously won't have the same preseason everyone else does because he's not travelled. Another thing I noticed about, which I talked about in a thread, is the new De Bruyne role and how it keeps transitioning from a less defensive orientated role. Like, I'm not saying it was defensive before, but his workload to a more attacking role and playing like a slight second striker, advanced 8 type of role. And I think he could really eat into Haaland's attacking output even when he does play. Pep's never really been one to concede to players apart from Messi. When he came to the club, Aguero was a club legend. He was the best striker in the league, and he basically said, "No, you're going to do as I say." And then another thing, like Neem said about the injury problems, and he's had that for the last 2 years. So I can see him maybe even playing 28 games in a season. And if you know that, do you really want to pick him over a Harry Kane, especially when you have the likes of the City mids?
I think the lure comes in the game week 2 fixture against Bournemouth for captaincy. So you could argue that if you're comfortable just captaining Salah in game week 2 anyway, because obviously Spurs play Chelsea, so that's not an ideal captaincy if you have Kane or Son. But if you're comfortable captaining Salah anyway, or if you do bring in one of these City mids, then suddenly you're like, well, would I maybe captain a City mid? Like, if they're just as rotation risk as Haaland is, then why not? Like, Mahrez can be explosive, Foden can be explosive. I agree with you on Grealish. So I think that whole idea that players take a season to bed into Pep's system.
Yeah,
he had 3 assists, 3 goals last season. He's £100 million signing. Pep played in all of the first 8 game weeks of last year. I'm convinced that he can come good. My worry about him, I don't know what you guys think, is he's the only one of them that seems to only have one position in the front three. I think he failed in the false 9 experiment, so he only has the left wing. Foden can play the left wing or centre forward as a false 9, but I think that we might also see him on the right wing more often than we have in the past with Jesus now gone. Yeah. So people saying Mahrez has no competition, I think Mahrez's competition could be that Foden moves to the right wing. So you can see formations where maybe my original idea was Foden left wing or Grealish, centre forward Haaland, and then Mahrez right wing. But we've seen what happens with Mahrez. He could be in the form of his life and just disappear for 3 weeks in a row. It happened with Sane in the famous double game week. He was in the form of his life and just disappeared for both the double game weeks, didn't come on. So that scares me a bit with the mids, but at least I can stomach it more at 8 million and under than 11.5 million with Haaland, I think is my key point there. I can stomach their benching a bit better.
Yeah, so Teacher just put in the comments about how Grealish would be in a 4-2-3-1, and that's something I think maybe City could transition to, at least in game. They've obviously signed Calvin Phillips, and I know it's Man City, but you don't sign someone for 45 million who's been that good just to leave him on the bench most of the time. I imagine maybe he's changing system slightly because we have to remember when he came to the club, he did start with wing backs, and that's often forgotten about. So he's very tactically flexible, and I think Grealish would thrive in a 4-2-3-1 at Villa. It was more of a 4-2-3-1 when he was playing really well than it was a 4-3-3. He can pick up the pockets on the inside. He doesn't have to do as much work on the outside trying to beat players. He can use his angles and his passing. So I think he could really be the one. But we just have to
just
see.
to touch on Bernardo as well.
Yeah,
So I didn't mention him. Yeah, I didn't mention him just because I wasn't sure he'd still be here. But I don't know if like Barcelona have gone from the verge of liquidity and bankruptcy to like signing the whole of Europe. So maybe they'll still buy Bernardo. Who knows? But they seem to be in for Koundé now as well, John. So like they're just in for everyone. I don't know how they do it. But yeah, like there's some stuff I read about how they're basically like using the money they would get from future contracts they don't have yet in the TV rights, which then means they're basically running with the assumption that they need to get that money back eventually, but who knows when, because clearly they owe money to De Jong as well, right? So it's all a bit fucking wild, I think. But on that note, if Bernardo does stay, that just adds another person that could be a threat to Mahrez. So I'm not convinced by Mahrez either. I think if I was to pick, had Foden gone on the preseason tour, he seems to be one of Pep's favourites. And he seems to find a way to use him a lot. So he would have been my number one midfielder to go for if I was not at that price point. So if I couldn't afford 8 million, I think Grealish at 7 million. At this point in time, I would pick him over Sancho at 7.5.
Yeah. I think Mahrez might not be a bad option just because of kind of what I saw yesterday with the preseason, him starting on the right. I think Bernardo is a top player when he's used as an 8. I'm not particularly a fan of him when he's playing wide, and I know he hasn't been used there for a while. So I think it probably goes for me. Mahrez, Grealish, Foden, but yeah, we'll see. See.
Sounds good. Let me just skip through to a few more versions of these slides. So obviously this was every team, which is why Trossard was top. But when we just look at the shortlisted teams over the last 6, Diaz shoots to the top. You have Mount there, Foden, Mahrez. Bernardo sneaks in. Trossard's still up there above Saka, Maddison, and Kulusevski. But you can see the 8 millions really start to dominate the rankings once you look at these teams. What are your thoughts here?
That's key, I think. And I think I've just put a question in: how many 8 million assets have you got? And we've got Firetog. We'll just put them up now. We've got Firetog with 2. We've got Zod 2 in a balanced team, 0 in a threemium. You see, that's where I think threemium becomes a real problem, because sure as eggs are eggs, 1 or 2 of these 8 million players are going to pop off, and you're going to have to jump. You're going to have to jump, and are you going to take a hit to do that? If you have 2 8 million assets and 500,000 in the bank, I think that's the most flexible way to move to any 8 million asset without having to move. Without potentially having to tear your team apart to try and do it. But the issue is that, it starts to impact the rest of you. It starts to impact the rest of your side. I mean, look, just to finish this Manchester City discussion, if I was to nail you all down on a Manchester City midfield asset right now, who would you go for? Because it's all well and good as saying Grealish, but would any of us actually do it?
I had him in a draft until I managed to, because I wanted Cancelo, and the only way I could afford it was Grealish. Whereas if I had like Laporte or Diaz, I would.
Laporte's injured, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that. So that kind of brought back the Stones 5.5 memories. But if Cucurella deal doesn't go through, I think Walker at 5 million and a double up with Cancelo suddenly becomes very appealing. But from a midfield point of view, I hate to say it, but because Foden didn't go on the preseason tour, it would still be Mahrez for me in week 1.
I go Mahrez as well. Grealish second.
Christ almighty. Gabe, please don't say Mahrez.
I would probably only go Mahrez. I would not go Grealish.
Oh, you bunch of utter bastards. do you know what? I mean, I'm going to have to bury my inherent bias here. I agree with you, Nima. I think the pre-season tour, not going on that, is a concern for me. I'd be more concerned in some senses the fact that he, if there was something other than the fact that he's just unvaccinated in many senses, he is Pep's golden
He's a
boy.
party boy as well, though. That's the problem. Him and Grealish are a bad influence. I think Grealish is the bad influence on him and everyone around himself. Grealish, as we've seen from the photos that got leaked one time with him just standing there with a woman's breasts in his mouth, like he's a suspect character.
Pep
Over
loves
18.
Foden. Pep loves Foden, though. That's one thing I will say is he wants to develop Foden. He wants Foden to become excellent at every single position on that front three. So I don't know. I think I would put Foden above Grealish.
Yeah.
I think one thing, just on Foden quickly, I think one thing I do want to say is I'm not sure that Pep has decided what his ultimate position is, and I'm not convinced it's on the wing or false nine. I think he'd be a killer 8. So I think long term, he's not been played in an 8 yet, but we may see that he starts to play as a CM more often in the future. There's a reason they've not gone and kind of replaced, Bernardo quite yet, because I think he's the successor ultimately, and David Silva as well specifically. Like they never bought anyone once David Silva left, and I think it's because Foden is that guy.
Yeah, I believe
Foden has that vision.
But I think that's what I mean. He's so young. I'm not sure if he's been developed yet enough for Pep to be willing to put him there. But maybe that's what he's ultimately trying to make him become. Maybe he wants to tell him, how about in the future, like where you would have shot, why don't you pass next time? Why don't you be more part of the build-up from the 8? Like, don't just shoot on sight kind of thing.
When City played Leeds away last season, I believe Foden did start in an 8. I might be wrong, but I believe he did start in an 8 for the first half at least, and he was really good. He was really, really good. One thing to say about the rankings that I really like on the graphic is Mount is ranked second. I currently have Mount in my team, and he's got sub 10% ownership. And I think considering how strong he started pre-season, considering that Chelsea's front three looks good, the fixtures are very good attacking-wise, I think he's one that's certainly going under the radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, let's talk about Chelsea a bit, because I think we've talked about City enough, and we'll come back to them in the Game Week 1 episode, I'm sure, as we get more info. But from a Chelsea point of view, then, I think I agree with you. I think if I was going to pick one of them now, Havertz has been changed to is it a forward? So so I think with that in mind, Mount is the only one I'd prefer out of the two of them, because I'm not convinced as a false 9 Havertz is like the guy I would want. Like I really like Mount, and you guys haven't really gone in and like changed any of those wingers, right? Like I've not seen Pulisic leave, I've not seen Werner leave. I think Mount's just too good to pass up. He could be playing out of position essentially, right? In a position that like Salah and Son play at 8 million for one of the top teams in the league.
I just think there's no profile replacement for someone like Mount. A lot of top managers and top players talk about how good Mason Mount is, and I think that's because he's a very rare type of player. One, he's got the attacking output and he can do all that side of the game, but the defensive side of the game is also kind of not replaceable, especially in a forward position. I think with the fact that Chelsea already play 3 at the back, having an additional person to be able to press from the front that well makes Chelsea a lot more solid defensively. And when you're a lot more solid defensively, naturally attacking you're better as well. So I think Mount in that position could be really good. Maybe if Chelsea try something like they did last season where they went split strikers, because Havertz can definitely play that, and Sterling's played a false 9 role, so he's used to the central position as well. And I can see maybe Mount playing as a hybrid type of 10, which would obviously boost his
That's still very exciting, right? I think maybe I'd even prefer him as a 10 behind 2 forwards than as a winger potentially. So I think it's all positives for him, and I've started to see him creep into some drafts, and it has made me question, like, we've all been focusing on James or Chilwell or both or Mendy, but with such great fixtures, like I do think there is an opportunity for an attacking player from Chelsea in our teams, and Mount's the only one I can currently consider, but maybe when we talk about the combination of mids later that Mariner wanted to cover, Sterling at 10 million, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and whether kind of like Sterling plus like, let's say, a 6 million, is that better than 2 8 millions, for instance? So would Mount plus like Diaz here, or Mount plus Mahrez, Mount plus Saka or Maddison, are they better than Sterling and like someone who's 6 million? So that'll be an interesting debate. But let's I think there's a nice graphic as well. So it's just a little bit more info of the minutes per game last season and the points per 90 as well. You can see here you've highlighted all the 8 million players. I can see, Mariner. So you're really keen on having two of them, aren't you?
No, this is actually not my slide. This is Gabe's. This is Gabe's.
Okay.
Gabe has nicked this slide. So Gabe, you need to give someone credit straight away.
That's right. You see that right in the middle. It says plot by @FPLFrasier on Twitter. Really great guy, has a great mind for the game and FPL alike. And he's plotted on the y-axis. It's minutes per game, so we're expected minutes there on the y-axis last season. And then on the x-axis, it's the points per 90. So the higher the player up is in the graph, the more minutes they get, and the more to the right that the player is, the more points that they get. And we see, like all that cluster of 8 million. So if we're going left to right, so from least amount of points per 90 to most amount of points, we have Saka first, and they're all in a cluster. So I don't think that it really matters that one is slightly ahead or gets slightly more. I think it's important to notice that this graphic should actually make your decision making a lot more difficult, because it doesn't really tell us which one stands out. So from left to right, we have Saka, then Foden, then Luis Diaz, Mason Mount, Maddison, and then Kulusevski. But then way on the right, but then low, so it means his minutes per game is quite low, is Mahrez. But Mahrez is beyond 8 points per 90, 8 FPL points per 90, whereas Kulusevski's down just over 7, and then Maddison at 6.5, and the rest down to Saka around 5.5. Mahrez just blows them all out of the water, and if we think he's nailed, that's an interesting punt to certainly. I don't know what his ownership is, guys. I haven't seen his ownership in a little
It's
while.
like non-existent. We should definitely convince Mariner to start the season with him. It's the reason that he lost FPL last year. That
so
penalty
what actually happened with Mahrez? Was it the penalty miss against
penalty
West Ham?
miss, not penalty miss, right? Yeah. And of
Yeah.
course, him not being played, him being benched in the double game week. I thought I was being real crafty and went Mahrez, thinking he'd been rested, and then he carried on being rested, didn't he? And then I was sat in a bar in Dubai watching the football, and I was sat with my mate, and I said to him, said you got a penalty. Excellent. I went up to the screen, looked at it. Oh, Mahrez has got it. Thought so. I said, he's going to miss this. And he did.
He really got you bad.
In the chat, Firetalk asked if Mount's on pens when Jorginho's not. And I'm just saying he's definitely not going to be. He 100% won't be. So, yeah, that's just to answer your question.
I think especially with Sterling arriving, he loves grabbing the ball if no one's around. He'll be there quick to take the opportunity if he can. Who I thought was incredible at penalties is Reece James. He is fucking insanely good. His techers are just disgusting. But yeah, let's... I think that's the main standout thing. I think the 8 millions is difficult to separate them. Mahrez, if playing, as you can see from here, he is the one to go for, but his minutes per game are severely lacking. Maybe with the players who've left in Sterling and Jesus, maybe it's better. But let's go to straight to all midfielders sorted by power ranking. So this obviously includes every price point, doesn't it?
I noticed there's a few people saying, can we have a look at it for over the course of the full season? Well, I knew it was in there, but I can post all these power tables. I can post them into the Discord for the members as well. So do become a member, everybody. That's the key, and you'll get the opportunity to talk rubbish with me, tactics with Lens, and Arsenal with Nima.
I think one thing I'll add is we're 1 hour 9 minutes in, and I've not even plugged the like. So if you found the stream useful so far, please do hit like. We do appreciate it. Obviously, it helps us a lot. And if you're new to the channel, do hit subscribe and You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google if you prefer to listen while washing up or walking your dog. So
we have 39 people watching and 27 likes, so we have a little bit of catching up to do.
Oh.
And if you missed that anything Chelsea, of course, Gian is saying, you got to pay attention. The guys a fan. I wore this shirt for you, Gian, one of my favorite players.
Oh, Michael Essien, yes.
Michael Essien Ghana jersey, so this one's for you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Given that it's a year of everyone going on strike, until we get more likes, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just going to leave this on the screen.
Yeah, let's get over 30 likes. 3 more people, guys. I remember when I once said, do you remember when they used to show the dislikes? I used to say smash like or get out, and then like 5 viewers would leave and leave a dislike on their way out. Those were fun times when I used to drink a lot on air, John. Now I just have tea or coffee. But in the early days, it was very novel. And one time I became known as 5-drink Nima because I had 5 different types of alcohol. And I was people were like, what the hell is going on? Like, you've gone from cider to gin to beer to like, you know, it was just everything was around. There was wine. Like, I used to get messages saying, have you got progressively more drunk on air? I'm like, yes, the wine bottle is finished. I'm a bit more professional these days. I've grown up a bit in this last year and a half. Just a bit more professional. I've got Oliver the cat. I might bring the cat pick back this year, by the way. There's another thing. Anyway, I've just thrown him away.
One thing I'd say about these
midfielders. Can we quickly look at these midfielders? The overall
one thing I'd say about the power rankings that's really interesting is Diaz at number 6. Now, I'd say I think he's a good option, but I'd say even though he's at number 6, to be wary of him, just because I think Salah and Trent should probably be locks. I know we say no one's essential, but they probably are locks in a lot of sides. And then I'd have both Robertson and Alisson above him in the pecking order for my 3rd Liverpool spot. And you kind of have to have a 3rd Liverpool spot. So I think maybe that's just one thing to monitor about the power rankings.
I like me attacking combinations. And I don't think I'm going to get an awful lot out of Salah on his own, given his ownership. And that's one reason why I quite like Diaz. Because, you know, Nima knows me with if you've seen any of the preseason content last season, Gian, I went big onto combinations, Son and Kulusevski for Gabe. I had some Arsenal combinations. I've said Ben Rama and Antonio at the start of last season.
Bruno and Greenwood, there's a lot of attacking combos.
I do like those attacking combinations. So I think I'm going to, with gritted teeth, forgo Robertson.
Well, I'm looking at Robertson and potentially bringing in Nunes as well, maybe. I don't know. I'm looking at like if I go double attack, I might do Nunes and Salah with Trent.
Wow,
potentially.
Yeah,
if he scores a hat trick in the Community Shield again, I'm sure a lot of knees will be jerked when Haaland doesn't even show up.
But he's 9 mil, right? Isn't he?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So instead of
Diaz, I just can't see the benefit.
No. So it's the combo for me. So I would have. So someone was asking in the chat earlier, how do you have Salah, Trent, Cancelo, double premium and 2.8 million mids, and you don't? That's why you're stuck, Mariner. So how you have that combination is instead of going for Kane or Son when you sell Haaland because he's not going to start, you go for Nunes and Jesus as the front line, and that suddenly leaves you 2.8 million mids plus a super strong back line. If you don't want Nunes, you get Robertson and Vardy. So the option to go for Vardy, who always starts off well.
I don't know.
I think what we will have
like that to start with.
I will have some strong words about Nunez next week when we do the forwards. But
excellent. I look forward to it. But that's in the forward section. So
that would be the forward section. In the meantime, we can all laugh at the Nunez hype.
Okay, good. We'll come back to you next week on that, Gabe. Because Nima's not here to talk about Arsenal next week.
Well, I don't need to talk about Jesus. He picks himself, so I'll leave you guys to do that.
He does with that ownership. You're right.
At that price and that ownership.
I know. All right, guys. Look, I just want to bring a couple of other players to the screen. We're not really spoken about them much, really, but let's look about halfway. Where the hell is he? I can't even see him. Oh dear. No, he's gone. He can't be on that slide. I'm going to talk about Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle. 6 million, right? Is he? And let's bring another player in, Martinelli, right?
Yeah.
Are they the game breakers, players like that at that price range. And the reason I want to take that forward is I want to jump into this chat, which we were talking about earlier, Nima, whereas this midfield structure, okay, and if we were to go Sterling, and you look at Sterling's old stats, and you see, what was it, 17, 18? How many goals and assists did he have when his minutes were up?
Yeah, he just pulls up numbers for fun. He does it for England as well. I think people don't give him enough credit.
No, we don't. But if we were to shoehorn someone like Sterling in, then we would have to do something like that with respect to the structures which we used from Fantasy Football Fix earlier in the season. And that would have to pull the obvious way would be to pull that midfield out, but that creates a gap at 8 million, doesn't it? So you've got Martinelli, you've obviously got players like Martinelli and Bruno up at Newcastle. At 10 million, you've got Bruno Fernandes and Sterling. I'm not saying Fernandes is the right choice. It's just the only picture I could find for the screen. So don't destroy me for that. I couldn't find a picture of Sterling with a Chelsea shirt, quite frankly. That was the reason why. But you know, if we're honest with ourselves, right? Are we prepared to break our structure for someone like Sterling? And I think that's a really good debate. Gabe, can I come to you first on this? Where are you on the 8 millions against things like a 10 and a 6, for example? 2 8s against a 10 and a 6. Where are you on this?
My tinkers have been on the 2-8 side. I think the 10 and the 6. I mean, there are 2 10s, right? We're looking at Sterling or Bruno Fernandes. And I mean, of the two right now, we still don't know. There's so many questions with United that it has to be Sterling, right? So if we look at Sterling and a 6 million, Martinelli will he be nailed? I guess Neema can speak more to that. I'm sure he might be initially, but will Smith Rowe come in there? Will that change a little bit? And then the Bruno Guimaraes, he's going to be a talisman for the team, but he's going to be a creative talisman. He's responsible for switching the point of attack. He's that what is it, the fulcrum in the middle, right? And his ability to switch the point of attack is actually like that ability to switch that point quickly is what creates space in the middle for him to run into. So I think he could be a really nice option. But again, there are tons of questions, and they're still on a team that's getting better, but they're not a top team. Whereas if you go with the 2 8 million players, you're getting 2 players on top teams, and I think that's why it's because of that reason that I side more with them.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. Neema, obviously we have another player involved at that 6 million level, and that's Martinelli. Do you want to take this one? Because I know you've got a slide which we'd taken from the Arsenal YouTube channel, which you maybe want to give a 30-second plug to as well while you're at it.
I think I'll put up the slide as well. Yeah, while I mentioned.
Yeah, I think the discussion really is around, for example, Saka against Martinelli as well, because there's another discussion, right? So that's maybe the 8 million if you want that Arsenal asset, and I like the Arsenal fixtures. Are we prepared to go Martinelli instead of Saka?
Yeah, so I think obviously, like, I would plug that you go and watch like my new channel. It's got 2 episodes. The second episode is specifically an FPL special where we look at Arsenal assets and like where there might be value. One of the things I found on the Fantasy Football Hub predicted points tool was the first 8 game weeks I looked at. So for me, I've kind of been...
Martinelli's ahead.
Yeah, so he's on 40.5 predicted points in the first 8 weeks at 6 million compared to 36.7 for Saka. Predicted minutes-wise, he's predicted 80 in every game. Saka's predicted 82. So he's actually not predicted to kind of be rotated at 60 minutes like many think. I think Smith Rowe is less of a threat to start with than people are expecting. Jesus is top on 42.4, so I think he's a lock for me regardless. But
Same.
I like the idea of double attack, and I don't want to be going Jesus and Saka. It's too much for me to start the season with, especially when there's players like Diaz and Mount and even maybe Maddison, Kulusevski, Mahrez. Like, there's so many 8 millions I want. Now, I looked at the underlying numbers and I compared like Martinelli and Smith Rowe. Martinelli had more than almost double the number of big chances per 90. It was like 0.66 compared to Smith-Rowe's, but he only got like 6 goals. Smith-Rowe got 10. I think Smith-Rowe kind of overperformed, and a lot of his shots were kind of from outside the box, like really niche angles, just finding their way into the corner. And Arteta had asked him to shoot more and score more. The thing is, what people have been talking about Martinelli, and I think they've been watching the games. They were saying like, oh, you know, in the preseason, in the second half against Everton, he played wing back, and it's like, no, he didn't play wing back. What Martinelli does off the ball is what Sterling at City does off the ball for Pep. It's that exact system. When we don't have the ball, they press. So it's what you were saying about Mount. It might look like they're playing wing back, but it's out of possession. They are just the first line of the press. A front three of kind of, say, Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka, they are a lethal pressing machine, and they give the rest of the press in the second row time to get back into shape should people get past that first row of the press. So for me, Martinelli, his underlying numbers, what he can do, I think he's one of the best finishers at Arsenal Football Club, if not the best. And he was very slowly brought back in after injury by Arteta. And people were like, oh, he doesn't like him. Why doesn't he play him? And it's because he was trying to teach him not to always be 100 miles per hour and to make the decision when to do that. So for me, Martinelli is someone I really highly rate. And the longer he gets minutes in preseason, while Smith-Rowe is fighting for fitness and doesn't even play any minutes, it makes me feel more assured that he's the starter. But the main point I just want to summarize with is that what Martinelli does off the ball with that press, that is why he will start over Smith-Rowe. What he does, his work rate is insane. And that front three's work rate of Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka, that is what Arteta wants. So for me, there was one thing that's worth bearing in mind is we try to do what Luke Disabled does about Man City and find out whether Arteta prefers Smith-Rowe or Martinelli based on tactical decisions, because obviously they were rotated quite a bit. And we found that there was no such thing. The rotation actually came about from when one of the two of them was unavailable for selection. So let's say Martinelli got suspended for his double yellow. Smith-Rowe would come in, and as long as he performed, he would then start every game for the next few. Similarly, if Smith-Rowe wasn't in the squad through injury, illness, whatever, as soon as Martinelli got that spot back, he would stay in. Arteta doesn't like to change things that are working. And with Martinelli getting the preseason minutes the way it's going now, I see him starting. We don't have Europe for the first 4 weeks. And so my view is that he would have to be out of the squad for injury or suspension before Smith-Rowe takes that spot. And Smith-Rowe still has a lot of things Arteta demands of him that he is capable of doing, but he's not developed yet. So I think he's far more nailed than people give him credit for. And I think he's only going to get better as a player. I still want to conclude he's one of the best finishers at the club. His kind of big chances per 90 as well, they're significantly higher than Saka's as well. So I think Martinelli playing more minutes and getting ready in this preseason is exciting. Just to touch on Steve's point before we move on as well, so he talks about the midfielders. So I would say a lot of people seem to be talking about Martinelli and like the midfielders. They have no impact on him. So I'd say that Zinchenko would impact Xhaka only. And by the look of things, Arteta doesn't trust Tierney anymore. He's let us down at pivotal parts of both of the last 2 seasons, where we got knocked out the Europa 2 years ago and lost out on top 4 last year. You can't build a team for the future where your number 11 starting player can only play 20 to 30 games a season. He can't rely on him. And from my understanding, Tierney's still injured now in the preseason. And if anything, I would imagine that Zinchenko could start at left back instead of him. He offers something different. And if he plays in midfield, it will be in place of Xhaka. So I don't think they have any impact on Martinelli. The only thing to bear in mind is that Martinelli played really well when Tavares was there at left wing back, and like he's probably going to go out on loan. And I think Smith-Rowe played very well when Tierney was there. So maybe those triangles on the left between kind of Xhaka and whether that's replaced with Zinchenko, whether it's Tierney at left back or Zinchenko, that might have an impact tactically on whether he picks Smith-Rowe or Martinelli in that left wing spot. But to start with, I just think Smith-Rowe is going to play in the Europa League, and it's going to take a considerable drop in form from Martinelli to be rotated. And I don't think it will be at 60 minutes. It will be at like 70, 80 minutes. So that's kind of my 2 pence on him. I think he's incredible value at that price.
He looks it.
Like
I think
he's
so.
honestly he's electric for me. Like just from an eye test point of view.
I have to say he does look it. And I mean, if you look at this, I've just put the slide up of the 8 million price points against the others, and that's the top 5 there. So you've got Sterling sat there at 10 million, obviously 10 million, 29.1. This is first 5 games again. Credit Fantasy Football Hub. Foden second, 28.7. Diaz 26.4. Bruno Fernandes 26. Dead, and then Martinelli 25.3. So if you were going to do a Diaz and a Foden, 53.6 combined points. Sterling and Martinelli 54.4. Nothing to call. The issue is could you go? And here's another question. One thing I've been doing is busting my ass trying to keep $500,000 in the bank. Now, if I went Sterling, I wouldn't need to potentially have to worry about keeping $500,000 in the bank because I can always drop down.
I really like Sterling. So what's your thoughts on that, John? Because I really like him. Do you think he will be coming in like starting at the beginning, or like will he take time, or do you think he's pretty assured at least for now?
Yeah, I think he's the best. I think he's the best player we have now going forward. Proven in the league. A lot of credibility, used to the environment with England. I think he's going to do so well. I think the fixtures are really good for him, and so I think the system's good for him as well. I think one thing at City where he excelled was even though when he would play out wide, he would still really wide. He would still be able to put up numbers. So the fact that he can now play in a system where he's not the false nine, so he's not as relied upon to do some of the dirty work and fill in between the lines, but where he's playing on the left now of a front three with Havertz playing centrally, I think he could cause some real problems for other sides there and get a goal tally that's a serious contender. I wouldn't be surprised if come the end of the season he's third in the Golden Boot. I think he could do really well. I think the Chelsea system is tailored for him, and I quite like it because I know what you were speaking earlier about Martinelli, and I'm the exact same as you. So I've got the double up of Jesus and Martinelli at the moment. I think Martinelli is a top player. And it was really good to hear your insight about how nailed he is, because that's kind of made me more assured of my pick. And I think Martinelli can
I think he's very nailed, man. I think he's honestly super nailed. I think he'll come in as one of the bargains of the season at that price point when he plays. Just a few tactical points. So we were playing like a 4-1-2-3-1 with Partey as the lone 6 and Odegaard and Xhaka as 2 advanced 8s, a position Xhaka's not accustomed to, but did well enough despite not necessarily having the biggest turning circle like the Titanic. And then obviously you had the 3 behind the striker. The thing is, he wants to ultimately go into a 4-3-3 like Man City. So I think one thing I will say is that the only time we might play a back 3 is away against like Liverpool, City and Chelsea. I don't see us playing a back 3 any other time. And that would actually make Tierney less exciting because he would be playing as the left centre back in a back 3, not as the wing back. If we played a back 3, Zinchenko or Tavares, if he stays, would be the wing back in that formation. So Tierney, what worries me about him as well as being kind of potentially broken all the time is that he offers one thing very well, but he's not as kind of versatile as Zinchenko. What Zinchenko will do for us if he plays left back is he'll do the Cancelo role. In possession, he won't actually be a left back. He'll be a left centre mid. So our formation in possession will be like a back 2, and then the 2 fullbacks will push up next to Partey, and then you'll have everyone keeps advancing. Exactly. So in that scenario, I think Zinchenko is very exciting. I think he might be more exciting at left back than at left centre mid for us, because in possession, he'll basically be the creative playmaker from deep that we see from Cancelo, and that's quite exciting for me. Just Martinelli, I know people are worried about him being rotated. I think the start of the season, when Smith Rowe isn't fit, if there's ever a time to go for him, for me, it's then. And if it flops, it's not one of your key premiums or like 8-10 million players. You can't just move off him. You can just go to like a Bruno Guimaraes later. For me, I find it wild that Bruno Guimaraes has that ownership, essentially playing as a CM for a team that barely can score goals, compared to Martinelli with incredible FDR. So over the first 8 weeks, Hub has Arsenal as number 2 in the attacking FDR, the second best team. And I see this season as a unique season because we can change our team twice before game week 17. So I'm seeing it in quarters. So if I can get a 6 million asset that at least for the first 4 weeks is not going to be competing with anyone else in that position, I would. Now, just bear in mind, if we sign another winger, ask me again closer to game week 1 how that might look. But as it stands, he is a no-brainer in my team. I like him more than some of the 8 million.
It's a really good
One thing
conversation.
about Bruno Guimaraes is, I think with Callum Wilson coming back into the side, he's much better than the previous striker, Chris Willett, dropping into the pockets and being creative from there. So that will limit how much Bruno can really do on the ball, and where he will be positionally. So I think if there's a shootout between one of them two, Martinelli is miles ahead.
All right, good. Guys, we haven't really covered the premiums, but I think there's only one question, and I'm just going to, whether any of us has contemplated going without Salah and going with Son instead.
Nope.
Has anyone even considered it? I haven't personally. Jan, you're shaking your head. Gabe?
Yeah, no chance.
Nope.
No chance.
No. Nima, you're not on the Son wagon.
Especially
You
not for his
definitely,
first player.
yeah, you definitely won't be. I shouldn't even have asked you, really. Nima, have you considered it? No. Has anyone in the chat considered it? Let's see what happens in there in a few minutes. So that's the information, guys. Should we take some questions then? See what's going on in the world?
Yes.
So just bear with me.
In the chat there, they should be starred there, Mariner.
Yeah, hang on a second. Right.
Nima has some from Twitter.
Just give us.
Yeah, I have some questions. I'll start with while we're waiting for more from the live chat, I'll start with some of the questions from the Discord from the members. So we had William asked about Leeds mids. I know we touched on them briefly earlier, but it'd be good to talk about like how March will prefer to set Leeds up. And, everyone's kind of looking at, say, Neto, but, William's looking at alternatives to Neto. And we said Aronson came in at a similar price. So I don't know if you want to touch on Aronson a bit, John, while we wait for more questions to come in.
Yeah, so essentially, he's like, the way he played with Adeyemi was almost like a really advanced 10-second second striker type of role. He's very good technically. That's one thing I noticed about him. And his movements are quite direct. Like I said, the second striker type of role. He won't do something that like James Ozil did, where he'll just kind of drift in and around to be the focus of creativity, but rather he'll be able to get on the end of moves and score goals and drive for himself towards those positions. And I really like him as an option. I'm not sure how strong Leeds will be. They've lost Rafinha, they've lost Calvin Phillips, Bamford's injured. They haven't recruited massively. So maybe that's actually a good thing for FPL if so much of the onus will go on Aronson that eventually with the pure amount of output, he'll eventually get some returns. He could be an option. So yeah, I definitely look at him. Monitor Pedro Neto. Wolves, I think Pedro Neto is a great player, but Wolves can be slightly concerning. I don't think they're brilliant. I think Max Skillman's a very good player, just in case anyone wants to have a punt at him down the line. But Wolves can be a bit flat attackingly. I don't think Raul Jimenez has been quite the same. So if you were to wanting to pivot and go slightly differential, I think your 5.5 midfielder won't cause you too much damage. And Aronson would be a good punt at that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, to be honest, Neto he's been injured for a long period of time. He's coming back now. Goal and assist in pre-season. Clearly, that's going to start getting people even more interested in him, I would say. I'd say for me, fixtures are not brilliant, but he's that sort of player. He just strikes me as he'll be involved. If they do create anything, I feel that he'll be involved. I really can't comment on Leeds. I mean, for me, at this moment in time, I've got no intention of having any Leeds players in my team. I think I'm prepared to sit and watch them. I don't rate their matchups that well. Whereas, I think if you talk about someone like Neto, I do see some decent matchups sat there. So at least I might be able to have a go at him for a few weeks and see how it goes. All right.
Just can I just add on Pedro Neto? So,
yes.
So being the kind of vibes guy I am and quotes from players and managers. So Big Man McCall put out a good tweet today, which was, so he was talking about, this is a quote from Pedro Neto directly. And he said, "I'm feeling very good. And I think that my levels are rising to be better than I was before. The confidence is there. I know I will do well this season. We have more players up front now. I think the way we are playing shows the connection we have." So I've never doubted him. He glides around the pitch. My issue is around the rest of Wolves being kind of trash. So he's not a player I doubt in his own quality. It's Wolves and their ability to score goals and the other 10 players in supporting Neto. So I definitely think like at 5.5, there are very few options. And at this point in time, despite Leeds fixtures maybe being better longer term than Wolves, where it turns badly at Gameweek 6, I would still probably rather start with like a Neto. And if that goes wrong, move to like a Pablo Fornals in Gameweek 7 when West Ham fixtures have a great block, or move to an Aronson once we know more about Leeds and Marsh and what that looks like. So kind of despite Wolves being trash, just Neto's own quotes, the goal and assist in the preseason, like these matter to me.
And that's key, right? Remember what we saw, what we heard last year preseason with Ben Rama and Antonio.
Yeah, so it was that interview that made us buy Ben Rama, right? So
Antonio
said he was like, Ben Rama is on fire. And he was going wild in the fucking interview. And I was like, oh, okay. Like when your own teammates talk about you like that, they clearly see you every day, right? Like they know more than I know. So I'll back the players' instincts on their teammates.
These quotes, I think, particularly when you've got nothing to back it up, really, I think are quite important. I think
the one thing I'll say, last season we did see Ben Rahma do well in preseason. He was scoring worldies, and he was just feeling it. It was a one touch, and he just fire it. Whereas this season, I don't think we don't know what Wolves is, and Wolves might come out in a back four. Bruno Lage wants to play that back four, and that's been a source of struggle and conflict between him and the dressing room, is that they want to stick to the back three that Nuno Espírito Santo kind of like put them in, and Lage wants to move them to a more attacking, more pressing, higher pressing back four. So that could be good for Neto, or there could be a more rift in the locker room and it could implode. So I think they're definitely a wait and see for me. Despite his personal attributes, I think there are better teams to invest in at that price point for me.
Okay. So just one more question from Discord. So this one was from FPL Teacher. He said, what is the target FPL output for a budget midfielder circa 6 million to displace the premium as well as the new 8 million bracket? So Podner had said that he reckoned 5 points per game was the target for a budget midfielder. So if you're 6 million and you're getting 5 points per game, that's probably very good value for 6 million. So, looking at Martinelli, who we said was predicted about 40 points in the first 8 weeks, the 8 weeks times, divide by 40 even, that's basically 5 points a game. So
I think 5 is very good.
Yeah, 5 is very good. So I think that's the ceiling, for a 6 million.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're getting 5 points from an asset at that price in the midfield, then you're definitely doing very well. Gabe, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, and I was just going to read out, because we had that FPL Frasier's plot graph earlier, and I'll read out the players that are averaging 5 points, that averaged 5 points per 90 last season. We're looking at Will Saha, Bernardo Silva. I'll only kind of mention the relevant ones. Van de Beek is there, but let's see who else. Buendia is around there. Fraser's just below that. Martinelli is between 5.0 and 5.5. Coutinho is just beyond 5.5. Muepu's in there, and Naby Keita's in there. So that's what you're looking at 5.
Naby Keita, my God, that's when I know that I'm definitely not using my third Liverpool.
You're in the wrong bracket.
Yeah, something's wrong there. But we have the final question from the Discord is from Robert Ducky, and I think it's a good one to ask this group. So he said, with the high number of realistic captaincy options this season, is this the first season in a while that the necessity of owning Salah, especially at 13 million, isn't there?
I think the issue is really, for me, it's the ownership which worries me. Salah's ownership is just so high. Going without him is a monumental risk. He's a habit of starting early, starting quick, doesn't he? He starts quick.
I think
if he starts quick, let's say, for sake of argument, let's say we go with Son instead. Now, Son they've got an extremely good fixture against Southampton. Salah has arguably an equally good fixture away at Fulham. Ownership-wise, we'll probably have Salah a lot higher than Son. I don't know what Son's ownership is right now. I've not checked. We'll just come back from holiday.
It's pretty decent. It's quite substantial. Yeah, it's a lot higher than I thought.
But is it going
for the highest mids, isn't
to
it?
hurt us? Like we said, Nima, when we have these chats in our WhatsApp group, are we going to get murdered by him? Whereas we are going to get murdered by Salah if it goes wrong, right? Are we going to get murdered by
Yeah,
Son?
I think Son is
26%,
currently like 26.
26.7.
So if you add him and Kane and even all the captaincies, even combined, they'll come in not even half of Salah's EO in game one. I don't want to talk about just ownership though, so I won't stick to that point. But I think it is interesting. Like some people would say in game week one, maybe target higher EV gains, like higher predicted points, as opposed to say just ownership. But the way I like to play is pretty template. So I think I'm the wrong person, maybe all of us are, to ask about having no Salah. I know that Andy Martin and Rubber Ducky obviously have like a cult following about not having Salah. And it worked for Andy Martin. Obviously, he did very well despite coming second to me in the Rockstar All-Star League, which I know he loves seeing every week when I put the trophy on screen. But better luck this year. He almost caught me up without the Salah captaincy with that KDB triple captaincy. But personally, like I can't see a world in which I wouldn't want like the player fighting for Golden Boot every year for Liverpool. I think Andy's points were that he'd only captain him in game week 1, game week maybe I think it was 4 and like 6. So he was like, I can captain other players in those weeks. Instead, I can captain Kane or Son in game week 1. There are alternatives, right? But we saw last year what Salah did against United with the 3 goals and an assist. Liverpool don't need to play a trash team for Salah to haul. Like it could be any time.
Yeah.
And I know there was a spell where he was blanking for a while. What I'm really keen on is I want players that aren't going to the World Cup and Salah isn't. So that for me alone, knowing he's going to have a 1-month break in November, December, when everyone else is getting knackered, that just seems like if there was ever a time to have him when you know that he's going to get this huge rest, so he's going to be pushed to the max in the meantime.
Great.
That's just too much for me. Like I think for these guys, maybe they would get like Diaz, Robbo, and Trent, and hope that Diaz plus Son or Diaz plus Kane covers that gap. For me personally, I just can't see a world in which I wouldn't have Salah.
No, I think that's fair. Gabe, I'm just a bit mindful of time. Shall we quickly cover the members' questions in the chat?
Let's do it.
I starred a few of them, if you want to have those.
This is from Kevin Rose, FPL_Saffer. He says, hey guys, early morning for me, so going to miss tonight. Do the emerging cheap midfield options open the case for playing a 3 premium, 5-2-3 or 5-3-2 even with rotating cheap mids? Salah, Kane, Holland.
Well, I think I've seen a few teams.
Question.
Yeah, I've seen a few teams with 3 premium, and there's actually some with decent balance. I'd say the most general structure they've had is a 5-3-2, and in midfield they go Neto and then like Rashford, Martinelli, one of those, and then they go fairly big at the back, with a couple exceptions. Maybe they go 4.5 keeper, something like Tomiyasu, and then you get in your big ones like Trent. So I think it's actually decent. I'd just say there's too many weak points. I don't particularly want like 4 or 5 assets which are under like 5, which you will have in terms of the goalkeeper, defender, and 2 midfielders. I'd rather have a 4.5 keeper, maybe like Martinelli and Neto, and then the rest of the squad really strong. That's why I think big at the back with a bit of balance is the best.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Here's one from Steve. Hey guys, 11 p.m. here, so make it live. Keep me awake. What do you think, Lingard to Forest? We can go kind of quick fire through these. Lingard to Forest, quick thoughts.
Potential talisman. Fixtures are terrible.
Enough said. I think that's great. We got Donny.
It's the rapid fire round. The answers are in the earlier timestamps.
It's bedtime for many people. So, hey, all jumping in to say hi to all the haulers. Early morning gym running sessions have me knackered. Everybody's knackered. Everybody's going to bed. Everybody left questions.
Got to work. Cool.
So there's no question there, is it? I don't know who started that one. Let's see. Here's another one. Did we do this one yet, teacher?
Well, it doesn't. In answer, the FPL teacher asks, "It's very curious to see how your model rates Harry Wilson since he had hand in 29 of Fulham's 100 goals." Well, it doesn't because there's no stats for him, so we can't really cover that. But of course, it comes down to the fact that stats are not everything. We need to rely on people like Gian and Gabe for the eye test. I would say.
Eye test. Speaking of Ice, has a follow-up question on Willock. What are your thoughts on Willock, really quick, fellas?
Nope.
Gian?
Nope. I think Wilson will have such a large majority of the goal scoring thing with some maximum to an extent. I don't like any of the Newcastle mates. But I do think Newcastle will do very well this season. I just don't.
Doesn't tend to offer much apart from goals as well. He doesn't offer much assist potential from my experience. So it'd be a bit of a one-trick pony.
Few avenues to points. Here's one from FPL Pepsi. William, will Brighton defense be fine without Cucurella if he goes and Bissouma? So this is kind of a midfield question because of the loss of Bissouma. We know they have good fixtures. Your FDR likes them, Mariner. How are we looking at Brighton defensive assets?
I say no.
I personally really like Potter. I think he's a really good manager, and I'm sure if he's let Bissouma go, he's got something planned. That's my view. I'm still very, very keen on Sanchez in goal.
I really like Potter as well. But I think if you're to lose your best holding midfielder, who's one of the better holding midfielders in the league,
True,
and then lose your best defender, probably your best defender in Cucurella, I think naturally any team would suffer.
Player of the year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Most accurate passer into the box. One of the most accurate passers into the box in the league. So I think the biggest indictment on Potter for me is the inability to sign a competent striker, and I think that people play that down. Like, oh, Potter's doing great.
That's a different topic.
That's next week's episode.
We can have a chat about Undav next week. I'll tell you what I'll do for next week is I'll look at. He came out the Belgian league, didn't he? I'll look and work out how the Belgian league compares with the Premier League, and see how much. And I'll make my prediction on Undav next week.
Okay. Just announcement, Firetog, thank you, new member. Thanks for joining, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Very nice.
And check out the description in the community tab about how to join the Discord. You just need to connect your YouTube or Google sign in into Discord once you download the app, and you'll slide right into the server. Of course, we have the most live concurrent viewers now as we're wrapping up. So while you're here, while you're here, guys, please do smash that like button, please, and help us get there.
Maybe Asia has just woken up.
So Firetog follows the membership up with a question: Cancelo and an 8 million mid, I'm assuming, or Sterling and Walker?
Cancelo for me, that option.
Me too.
Cancelo and 8 million or Sterling and Walker. Yeah, I think I'd have to go Cancelo and 8 million at this moment in time.
What else we got?
So I got another one from Willie. Oh, no, wait, you've done that one. I was going to ask about the Christopher C's just tuning in. He was asking about Mahrez, especially if Bernardo to Barca happens. So when you go back, we're going to timestamp. There was a significant chunk where we talked about 5.5 to 8.5 million mids, and City dominated the conversation. I think 3 of the 4 of us concluded that Mahrez was the City mid if we had a gun to our head that we would pick for game week 1. So definitely go and have a little listen.
Oh, the other one's still pissed off from last season.
Just another question. Did you do the Fire Talk one about the predicted points from
No, hit that one. That's next.
So yes, Son or KDB to outscore Salah in 6 of the first 7 game weeks. So I think that's the key thing, is one of, right? And you're not going to have both. Unless you don't have a premium striker, I suppose. Maybe you start the season with both Son and KDB, but
isn't that what we spoke about, the structure, about the fact that by starting with 2 premium midfielders, you know, if Haaland does go off, and I'm not saying he will, and there's some doubt whether he will or not, then that's a transfer waiting to happen, isn't it? And it's a complete, it's a hit, or potentially it's a hit or it's not if you're prepared to wait till game week, or potentially game week 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think KDB is a really good option, though. If you wanted a real differential, I think he'll do.
I'm not saying he's a bad option. I'm just I just think 2 midfield premiums. I think as far as I would go, I'd go as far as Sterling plus, like the 2.5. 2.5 a year.
I love the 2.5. So I think for me, like, I don't think I'd go for freemium, but I would love the idea of like the 2 premiums plus a Sterling.
Yes,
that's something I'm really going to toy with.
That's the new name, the 2.5.
Yeah. And the final question was just from Nehal about. We'll wrap it up with this. So I know that you have to go as well, John. So if you have to rank Neto, Leon Bailey, Martinelli, Fornals, let's go around the room, starting with you, John. Like, what's your kind of ordering of those 4 assets? Best to worst.
Martinelli, Neto, Bailey, Fornals.
I'll keep it simple. I agree with you. I think until game week 7, I'm not interested in Fornals.
That's 3 out of. I agree with you as well. Completely agree. That's exactly the order I had in my mind. Gabe, you're going to disagree.
Yep, I disagree. I actually disagree with the question. I don't think we have enough information on the team
It's a
to
tough
really
one.
put an order. If I were to put an order on like potential, if they, let's say they're all nailed, right? If they're all nailed, then I go Bailey on the right wing for Villa with those fixtures I really like. Then I'd have to go, I guess, Martinelli, Fornals, then Neto.
Oh, you really don't like Neto and Wolves. Fair enough. Just before we go, final one from Diam. So Diaz plus 5 million defender or Cancelo plus Neco Williams is the first bench option. I think the latter for me all day long. Cancelo underperformed his numbers, if anything. Yeah. And I doubt Neco Williams is your first bench because you probably can have like a 4.5 mil mid like Pereira who can come on instead of Williams if you want. I wouldn't be benching a 5 million defender. I'd be playing them as my 4th defender every week, personally.
Williams is an absolutely solid second bencher. He's perfect for a second bench spot.
I think that's the key thing. Like, if you've got 2 4 million defenders, that's a different thing. Then I understand why you'd be a bit worried. But yeah, I think for me, the upside in Cancelo is just too much to ignore. Let's watch this space with if Cucurella doesn't come in, maybe Walker at 5 million is exciting. That's just something worth bearing in mind as well. So, and Cucurella himself is obviously 5 million if he does come in. So that's quite interesting. And yeah, so Dallo at 4.5. So I think he's probably nailed over Wan-Bissaka if they don't buy a right back. That is true. He does look quite good for that Ten Hag system. I think 4.5, he's probably one of my top 5 or 6 picks in that price range of defenders. But as this is the midfielders episode, I will revert you back to the defender episode to go watch it from last week, and we can answer more questions in the game week 1 episode once we have more info from the end of preseason.
And we can do some RMTs, can't we?
Yeah, we'll do some RMTs. So let's get us out of here. Thank you so much, Gian, for joining us.
No worries,
for anyone who doesn't follow you, it's at FPL_JIANBATRA if you're listening on podcast on Twitter. We'll put a link in the podcast description and video description. But honestly, man, like your articles on Hub, your threads on Twitter, they're incredible. So I would encourage everyone to go check them out. Definitely. Super interesting stuff. I know you and Gabe have talked a lot about tactics. He's especially pleased to have you here.
Yeah, it was really good to meet all of you. So thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll have you back as well in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, so thank you everyone. It's been a pleasure. Please do hit like if you found this episode useful. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple if you haven't listened on the podcast before. It means a lot. But otherwise, we were Net That Haul, and I will sign us out here, and we'll see you next week for the Forwards episode. So thank you, everyone, and see you next time.